Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, nothing better. Saturday morning, drinking your cup of coffee, scrolling Twitter. What pops up on the timeline? Former Clemson defensive lineman Tre Williams committing to Michigan. This is kind of a funny background story, right? We watch a lot of Clemson football. We saw his name pop in the transfer portal about a week ago after Clemson lost to Texas. And you sent me a message and said, this would be a really good cat for Michigan to look at. Look, we're sitting there at that time and said, I don't know how realistic it is. And then all of a sudden, there was no smoke around it. And you kind of check your phone Friday afternoon, Tre Williams on campus at Michigan. It sounds like Michigan's the leader in the clubhouse to land his commitment. Then you wake up Saturday morning and it's official. Tre Williams heading to Ann Arbor. Couple of big takeaways. One, I think this is a really good football player that the box score is probably not going to reflect his impact that he has on the football game. And I think secondly, Dill, he's just been a guy that struggled with injuries and has struggled to kind of stay on the football field for an extended period of time. Like you go back to some of the years, a couple of years ago, you're like, Tre Williams, he's going to pop at some point. You're seeing the flashes, and because he couldn't really stay healthy the last couple of years, you haven't really got that pop. Now he's coming off a fully healthy season in 2024, hitting the portal, looking for some better opportunities. This one for Michigan makes a ton of sense for a couple of different reasons. One, I think this is a really good football player. Number two, we've talked about it for the last couple of weeks. You can't replace Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Those are two of the best defensive linemen that you see in all of college football. They ain't going to be a Mason Graham. There ain't a Mason Graham across the country. There surely ain't going to be one in the transfer portal. One of the things we always said we can get better at on the defensive line is depth, which was kind of at times in 2024 painfully bad. Like Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant had to play a ton of football for Michigan in 2024. And when you're talking about the defensive line, it's so important to talk about depth because you want to rotate those big bodies throughout a 4-quarter game. You want to rotate them throughout a 12-plus game season. I'll stand by this. What made Michigan on defense so special in 2023 was how deep they were. Yeah, they had really good football players, but they were really, really deep and were able to rotate those guys. Why did Michigan dominate fourth quarters all year in 2023? Why did they dominate in the college football playoffs towards the end of the season? Because they were deep and they had the numbers to compete in the fourth quarter late in the season. That's what Michigan's building right now. And I want to get into Tre Williams. I want to talk about what this defensive line looks like. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Michigan fans, it's been a blast the last couple of weeks. We say it all the time. The last couple of weeks to be a Michigan fan has been absolutely dynamite. It's been a blast talking this team. The amount of support y'all have shown the boys has meant absolutely the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let it fly in the comment section. Dill, I want to start with two different conversations. One, you've watched a lot of Tre Williams, so I'm going to give you the floor in terms of what Tre Williams brings to this Michigan program.
And I think you said it. Like, is he going to come in and be the star that a Kenneth Grant or Mason Graham was, or even some of the high-level guys at Clemson, like a Peter Woods? He's probably not exactly that guy. But again, you talk about what Michigan's probably got to do to kind of at least try to hold serve on the defensive line. It's going to be about being able to play a little bit deeper. And Tre Williams is a guy who I think is very dependable in terms of being a defensive lineman you would trust to eat up 20, 30 snaps in a football game. Like, you look at how many Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant were playing. I mean, they were well up over 50. It felt like a fair amount of, that's too many snaps probably for a defensive lineman to play. Now, luckily, they were good enough players where it didn't matter if they were particularly fresh. They could still dominate games. But again, those guys were unicorns. You look, bringing in guys like Tre Williams, Damon Payne, they're not superstars, if you will, but they're going to make the sum of the parts, I'd like to think, better for this Michigan unit and be able to rotate a little
bit. They're proven commodities. And it's hard to find trench players in the transfer portal that are proven commodities. And, Tre Williams, Damon Payne, they're those guys. And I'll say another thing that excites me is what Lou Esposito does in terms of player development. That was the one thing that really fired me up about Lou Esposito taking the job at Michigan, the defensive line coach. You didn't really know how good of a recruiter he was going to be because you can't really recruit all that good at Western Michigan. The player development was absolutely out of that world. He had 3 NFL draft picks over the last couple of years. I mean, that's crazy player development along the line of scrimmage at a program like Western Michigan. And so you look at Damon Payne and Tre Williams, yes, they're towards the tail end of their college football careers, but both of them were top 100 prospects coming out of high school. Like, they have the physical traits. Now, can they come in with Lou Esposito and kind of reach some of that potential late in their college football careers? That's something that excites me. Now, the second conversation is, Dill, I'm going to name the names that I trust on the defensive line. In 2024, it was Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and Rayshon Benny. I think that's it. Etta Trey Pierce did not play a ton of football for Michigan in the 2024 year. What I saw from Trey Pierce and Etta in the bowl game against Alabama, they're on the list now. Like, those guys are going to be dudes for Michigan in the 2025 season. You got Demond Payne, Tre Williams in the portal, Etta, Trey Pierce, and Ike. They look like guys that are going to play. And then you add a guy like Rayshon Benny potentially coming back for one more year. That's what I counted six interior defensive linemen that you trust to play significant football in 2025. That's double what Michigan had in 2024. Now, here's the question, Dill. Who starts? I don't think it necessarily matters because I think all six of those guys are going to play a lot of football and probably play similar amounts of snaps. But if you had to pick two guys that kind of emerge as the starters, the guys that are playing maybe the bulk of the snaps, who are you going with?
Yeah, so assuming Rayshon Benny, he's pretty much the clear one. He'd be the alpha dog in that room, if you will. I look, it'd probably be Trey Pierce playing next to him. I think in terms of just dependability, and Trey Pierce, frankly, I thought played good for the most part in 23 or 24, I should say. He didn't play a ton, started to play a little bit more in the back half, but bowl game looked awesome against some really, really tough physical interior linemen for Alabama. And frankly, I thought against Ohio State as well, played a really clean game there. So I look at his ability to be a little bit more probably disruptive than some of the other guys on that list. He'd probably be my pick to probably play alongside Rayshon.
I very much agree with Trey Pierce. I thought Trey Pierce might have been our best defensive line, interior D, because Derek Moore was just in Caden Proctor pretty much all game. But you look at Trey Pierce and how he's just getting better as a football player. Quite frankly, you can say the same thing for Rayshon Benny. Like, Rayshon Benny, kind of came in a little bit late and doesn't get the attention because Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are so good. Rayshon Benny gave Michigan a lot of good reps the last 2 years. And then, Dill, here's the two wild cards, at least for me, right? And you said Etta. He's that one where it's like, man, if it clicks for him, he's going to be really good. And then secondly, I'll let you kind of take the wheel on this one, Manuel Beagle, a guy that we knew wasn't going to be a factor year one. But going into year two, I think this kid could find the football field.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm sure if everyone else, they watched that video of Michigan walking into the Ohio State Stadium with that song playing. I watched it 7,000 times. I'm sure almost everyone else watched it 7,000 times. You catch a glimpse of Manuel Beagle, okay, this guy's built himself up. Looks like he's the size of an offensive lineman, kind of ready to play that sort of interior line role. I'd be really interested to see what he can do because you knew he was a freak athlete coming out. You saw teams like Georgia, Penn State kind of get in on his recruitment a little bit late. And obviously a guy coming from Germany, not really an experienced football player, but man, there's some freaky athletic traits. I'd love to see him maybe carve a little bit of a rollout because, again, if Lou Esposito can kind of get him rolling, if you will, as a football player, he'd be a fascinating one to watch.
Hey, take good athletes, make them good football players. That's kind of the name of the game. And if there's a guy that I trust to do it, I do think it's Lou Esposito. Dill, I'll give you the T-box here. We'll probably dive into Tre Williams maybe a little bit later. Dill, if there was one other position that you'd want to see Michigan go out and address over the next couple of weeks, because to me they're checking the boxes. The pass catcher room is probably the answer for me. But one of the sneaky concerns was the inside of the defensive line. They've done it with two bona fide, starting caliber dudes in Demond Payne and Tre Williams. It is really the pass catcher room, to me, is the only one that stands out as the last thing you probably want to address.
And it feels like they're sniffing around at corners here and there. Corner, to me, doesn't feel like a super.
No, me neither.
I look at the way the young guys are playing in that room, the versatility you have in a guy like Zeke Berry to kind of fill in various spots, along with just straight up recruiting some absolute freak shows as young guys, guys that Michigan hasn't really been landing in that room in quite some times, it feels like. So I'm pretty comfortable. Jair Hill was really playing like a true number one by the end of that season. I thought he looked awesome. Zeke Berry, certainly a guy I think is very dependable. And then you look at some of the young guys coming up through the pipeline and what Lamar Morgan's been doing in terms of getting guys ready to go. I'm pretty
Yeah,
fine with it. I don't think that's a spot they need to address, but I wouldn't be opposed to adding a veteran into that group. Having said all that,
yeah, I think I feel good about it. I think the wide receiver room is probably number one, and that Michigan is taking a look at some wide receivers, and we're probably going to have that conversation over the next couple of weeks. That right tackle from Washington State, I think would go a long way in making me feel really good about the tackle spot. But again, in that same conversation, I look at what I saw from Andrew Sprague and say I feel pretty good about where Michigan is at tackle as well. This team, it's coming and taking its form. I think it's a signal. Obviously, Dill, Michigan was a really good football team in 2024. They just had they had a really bad quarterback play. And we all know you're capped. If you don't have good quarterback play, it's hard to win consistently every single Saturday. This is a team that just beat Alabama when Alabama was playing a lot of their guys, and just beat an Ohio State team in Columbus that looks to be right now, as much as I hate to say, the best team in the country. Like this team is a lot better than a lot of people think it was in 2024. It's coming into form, and if Bryce Underwood hits, it's going to be fun season in 2020.
I mean, that is imagine if he's as good as everyone says he's going to be. I have full confidence that's going to happen, because why wouldn't you if you're a Michigan fan? Like, yeah, you look at the way the defense is playing, the way they're starting to recruit, it would
the way that
really fun 3 years.
The way the defense is playing is my most that's going to be the most underrated storyline heading in for 2025 season. Like the storyline is going to be Bryce Underwood, and rightfully so. This Michigan defense under Wink Martindale the last couple of weeks of the season was elite. Like there were some growing pains early, but it got so much better, and you can tell the players were really grasping what Wink Martindale wants to do. There's a real chance we're looking at one of the best, if not the best, defense in the country in the 2025 year. We'll close it out on that. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.